Hello and welcome to the Genuine Learning Blog. My name is Melissa Galasso, and today we're going to talk about something a little different than normal. It is a proposed ethics interpretation that came out of the AICPA's Professional Ethics Executive Committee, but the topic is pretty interesting. The topic is cheating in CPE. Obviously, CPE is something we're pretty passionate about here at Galasso Learning Solutions. So we're going to take a look at why is the AICPA proposing this interpretation and what do you have to do to be compliant. So first off, again, we already had a section of the interpretations, right? The section of the ethics requirements in the Code of Professional Conduct around soliciting or disclosing CPA exam content, right? So if you are taking the exam, you can't ask someone who just took the exam about explicit questions, and you're not allowed to disclose those questions, right? So as we look at this, both of those were not permitted. However, recently, in the last year or two, we've had a couple of rather large, big instances where there were firms who were actually sanctioned by the SEC about their employees sharing answers to CPE examinations, and in particular, the ethics exam. Yes, they were cheating on the ethics exam to become CPAs. Not a good way to start off your career. And so as a result, the Professional Ethics Executive Committee, or PEEC, is expanding the section around uniform CPA exam questions and now addressing continuing professional education. Now, this was issued on March 15th of 2023, and comments will be due May 15th of 2023. So let's take a look at how this expansion is going to work. So there's really two parts of the CPE element. The first piece is a member who knowingly solicits or knowingly discloses questions or answers of any CPE course examination other than ones for which collaboration is expected and permitted. So obviously, if you've ever taken a live CPE class with me and I included maybe a case study, or maybe I asked you to go back and do a problem in a small group, we are hoping that you are collaborating when you're in that breakout session. So we are encouraging you guys to work together to solve the problem. So that is not a violation of the ethics code. These are the types of classes where you're doing it maybe on demand, and in order to pass the exam, or in order to get CPE, you have to pass the exam, right? So typically with a 75% passing. And so in those scenarios, when you're taking it on demand, it is not a collaborative element, and therefore you should not be sharing those answers with others. And so that would now be a violation of the Code of Professional Conduct. However, they know that only a small percentage of CPE really requires an exam. If you're taking group live, if you're taking group internet-based, and you are live or proctoring a rebroadcast, those are not deemed to require an actual exam or quiz at the end. Instead, we either are using some type of polling to make sure that you're there. We might be using code words to track your attendance, right? So it's really about participation and ensuring that you're physically present. And so as a result, just looking at CPE exam answers was not going to be sufficient. And so they expanded what would be an ethics violation to include falsifying attendance at a CPE course as part of that. And they make that an act discreditable to the profession in violation of the acts discreditable rule. So in this scenario, if you are maybe you're attending a class that does code words and you're not in the room, and you come back and say, hey, what was the code word for that session? Providing that, sharing that information would be an act discreditable. Signing in at 8:40 and saying you arrived at 8:30, that would be an act discreditable, right? So if you're using sign-in sheets, or if you're, have someone else answering your polling for you, falsifying attendance in a CPE course would now be an act discreditable to the profession. And as a CPE provider, this is really wonderful because I don't like to be the attendance police. That's not my job. I'm there to share information and to have great discussions and engage with the audience. And I don't like to be the person who's like, hey, didn't you step out for a half hour? Can you please fill out the exception form? It's like the least favorite part of my job, which is why we typically ask there someone be a monitor in our classes to assist with the exception sheet. Now it's nice to know that if people aren't cooperating and aren't filling this out, that actually could follow and violate our ethics code, and they could be in a lot of trouble. So putting a little bit of teeth behind CPE. So interesting reason for this, right? Not the reason we wouldn't typically want to go down this path, but I think it's important to make sure that we understand that CPE is part of the profession. It is how we ensure that we are protecting the public and that we're doing our best to stay up to date and really doing amazing work. And so as someone who provides CPE for a living, I do understand the importance of it and the goal of really making sure that people are doing the CPE that they say they are doing and they're achieving the objectives of that CPE. So that's my perspective as a CPE provider. It is your time to provide feedback. The AICPA would like your feedback by May 15th, 2023, and they have a few questions they'd like to ask of you. As a reminder, this is not something that just applies to those who are in public practice. This applies to people who are in industry and even people who are what we call other members, whether they are retired or they are maybe taking some time off to raise their family, but they're continuing to maintain their CPE or CPA license and are required to continue to take CPE. Then this would also apply to them. So it's actually part 1, part 2, and part 3 of the Code of Professional Conduct. So very important that this is for everybody out there. All right, so that's a wrap this week on the Genuine Learning Blog. I hope to see you in a future session. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.